My family had owned that lake for generations. My father used to say the water was the heart of the entire valley. Everything around it depended on that natural basin, and he made me promise I would never forget that. Years later, the water disappeared. A development project changed the flow feeding the lake, leaving the basin almost completely dry. At first, everyone said the water would eventually return, but the empty lakebed attracted someone else's attention. The HOA looked at the empty lakebed and saw a business opportunity. Vanessa Cole proposed building 37 luxury villas inside the basin. She promised the development would transform the entire community. But nobody asked the most important question. Where would the water go if it came back? I told Vanessa the lakebed wasn't ordinary land. I showed her the old water maps and pointed toward the dam upstream. That basin had held water for generations. Building inside it was a risk nobody could simply ignore. Vanessa told me the lake was gone forever. She said the land had been dry long enough to prove there was nothing to worry about. Then the HOA approved construction, and one villa became 37. Within months, the empty basin had become a luxury development. 37 villas stood where deep water once covered the valley floor. The HOA celebrated every new sale, and Vanessa treated my warnings like an old man's superstition. One night, I went through my father's old records. Buried inside a box was a map he had made decades earlier. It showed the lake's highest natural water line, and every single one of those 37 villas sat below it. I asked an engineer to review my father's records. Thomas compared the old maps with modern elevation data. Then he looked across the villas and told me exactly what I feared. If the reservoir level changed, the basin could fill again. Thomas explained the risk directly to Vanessa. He recommended a full review before more construction continued, but she refused to stop the project. The HOA had invested too much money to admit they might have built in the wrong place. Then the weather changed. Heavy mountain rain began filling the upstream reservoir faster than expected. For the first time in years, water started moving toward the old lake basin, and 37 villas were sitting directly in its path. The first streams reached the basin before anyone expected them. At first, the HOA called it temporary runoff, but the water kept coming to the channels that had once fed our lake, and the villas were sitting directly in its path. Vanessa called an emergency HOA meeting. Suddenly, the same maps they had ignored were spread across the table. Thomas explained that the basin was doing exactly what a lake basin was designed by nature to do. It was beginning to collect water again. Thomas pointed to the historic waterline on the map. Every villa had been built below that level. He told the board the basin could not simply be treated like ordinary dry land. The water was following the valley's natural path. Within hours, the internal roads began disappearing beneath the water. Residents were directed toward higher ground as emergency crews monitored the situation. The development that had looked permanent only weeks earlier was now surrounded by the returning lake, and the HOA finally understood the scale of its mistake. I took Thomas to an old marker my father had shown me years ago. It marked the lake's historic high water line. From that ridge, we could see the truth below us. The returning water hadn't changed course. The development had ignored it. Vanessa finally looked at my father's map. For years, she had treated it like outdated paperwork. Now the shoreline drawn on that old paper was appearing again in real life, and every line led straight through the development. Upstream, reservoir levels continued rising. Officials began to control water released through the dam spillway. The flow followed the same natural route recorded on the historic maps, and the old lake basin began filling faster. By the next day, the development was surrounded. The roads that connected the villas had vanished beneath the returning water. All 37 homes now sat inside what was becoming a lake again. The land had remembered exactly what it was. The flooding triggered an immediate review of the entire development approval process. Historical records, property boundaries, and engineering reports were brought forward. The same evidence I had shown the HOA months earlier was now being examined officially, and the question became who had approved construction inside the lake basin. In the end, my father had been right. The lake was never truly gone. It was only waiting for the water to return. The HOA built 37 villas inside a place nature had claimed for generations. And when the water finally came back, the valley reminded everyone who had ignored the warning.